Hello there, welcome to my review of the Rockford Files Season 3, Episode 9, Return to the 38th Parallel, written by Walter Dallenbach and directed by Bruce Kessler. The episode begins with two men discussing the sale of the one man, John Stabila's, stolen art collection. We then cut to a returning Ned Beatty, trying to get into Jim's trailer. He turns out to be Jim's old army buddy, Al Brennan.
Brennan?
In the flesh and then some.
The next morning, having been drinking and reminiscing all night, it seems that the two are being watched. But that's no concern at the moment, as we find out that Jim is going fishing with Rocky, so offers his trailer to Brennan as a place to stay while he's in town. It's not long though before there's a knock at the door, and it's a returning Veronica Hamill, this time as Marcy Brownell, who wants Jim to find her missing sister.
My sister Linda, something's happened to her.
Marcy reveals her sister is dating Stabila, the guy from the opening, but Jim refuses to take the missing persons case. Brennan isn't so reticent, and he seems to need the cash, which leaves Jim fishing alone and pondering before he gets a visit from the worst villains he ever faces,
IRS.
Brennan has pretended to be Jim and asking the IRS for Stabila's details. Jim's none too pleased about this, and Brennan admits he's already gambled away the money that Marcy paid him.
You get on your little white Charger, you grab her purse, and then you head for the $100 window.
It's at this point that Jim takes it upon himself to continue the investigation, while Brennan insists on tagging along.
I'm really going to try to learn everything I can.
Another solid and unique opening for the show, which slides rather than throws Jim into the deep end of a case he would otherwise stay well away from. Having seen Stabila's business up front, we can assume there's more going on here than a simple missing person. Brennan is set up as being naturally shifty, but not inherently dangerous, and it's been well established by this point that Jim has a blind spot when it comes to old friends. All we do have at this stage, though, is disparate pieces that don't seem to really fit together, which creates its own level of intrigue. With Jim on the case, he manages to finagle information about Stabila from a real estate company that sold him a house, which is all part of looking into Stabila's assets, but also a good excuse to show off how good Jim is at the con.
John Stabila is under investigation by the SEC, the FTC, FHA, SBA, and every other letter in the alphabet.
This leads Jim to Stabila's boat, while Brennan is followed by the guy who's been spying on him the whole way through. Noticing the tail, Brennan leads the man to a building where he grabs him for information.
You got exactly 12 stories to tell me yours.
Jim is suspicious of Marcy and wants Brennan to look into her while he stakes out Stabila. Underestimating the quality of Stabila's security, he gets himself a face-to-face with the man. Jim tells him the truth, under duress, and Stabila wishes him luck as Marcy's sister, Linda, apparently took off with Stabila's tape deck, but also says that she didn't have a sister. Jim confronts Marcy, but is knocked out by none other than Brennan.
I should have never let you talk me into this job. Give me my money, Brennan. I want out.
When Jim comes to, he's deeply confused by the whole thing until he finds Marcy's address book and finds out who Brennan is really working for. At this point, we've been given bits and pieces of information, but none of it seems to be true, apart from Linda being a real person who has gone missing. Otherwise, we have no idea what is true and what isn't, which all goes back to an earlier line from Jim where he initially tells Marcy that most people who go missing don't want to be found, and it appears that that's the case with Linda, and everything else is just created in order to confuse him. It's not unexpected that Brennan has been up to something this whole time, but also to establish Stabila as a genuinely criminal type was a smart move, as it muddied the waters so that by now I genuinely wasn't sure where this story was headed. Jim finds out that Brennan is one of two men working as freelancers for an insurance company, and the insurance company can't get in touch with either Brennan or the other man. Brennan was looking for a stolen vase that was being discussed by Stabila in the opening, but by the time Jim and Rocky get to Stabila's, the cops and fire brigade are there, as Stabila's been killed in a fire.
Now, what about Al Brennan? Did you check him out? It's with the FBI. He's a Cub Scout.
Brennan was there earlier with a cop who's investigating the theft, and Dennis is there investigating the death.
Time is crucial. I want him to search these grounds, too.
All culminating in a search of Stabila's boat, as Jim is convinced that that's where he's hidden the vase. This fails to turn anything up, other than the fact that Brennan was there earlier as well.
When'd you see him?
About an hour before you got here.
Jim finds out that Stabila's secretary is having Stabila's remains shipped back to his native Canada by train, but Dennis refuses to stop the train, so Jim has to chase it down. He eventually catches it, and Brennan, as Brennan desperately searches for the missing vase. Jim's able to find it, only to be stopped by Stabila himself and his secretary, who murdered the other insurance investigator, the man who had been following Brennan, and burned the body in Stabila's place, faking Stabila's death. After a brief tussle, Brennan, for some reason, throws the vase out of the train, but after everything is wrapped up and Stabila and his secretary have been caught, Jim and Brennan are unable to locate the case which had the vase in it, which Jim quickly makes peace with.
Okay, go on out there. Just wander around, keep looking.
This is an incredibly busy episode with lots of strings, but the connective tissue doesn't quite tie together. Structurally, it might have worked better had we known Brennan was using Jim earlier than we find out, as it wasn't a big enough of a reveal to be all that shocking. However, it's the Marcy-Linda fake-out that worked least well for me, as it took up a lot of the running time only to go nowhere. All in all, there was just a little too much going on. We had the fake sister paid by Brennan, the real Linda actually just running off, Stabila selling his stolen art to the black market, his secretary, who is introduced much too late, the boat red herring, the Brennan double-cross, the other insurance investigator who becomes the murder victim disguised as Stabila, the conning of the real estate agent, the theft of the vase, and the cop investigating it, the train fight conclusion, and Jim not wanting to be involved in any point. Paring down any one or even a few of these elements would have given the story a little more room to breathe and helped with the overall pacing. You don't even realise certain events, like Jim being easily identified by Stabila due to his high-tech security and connections, are meant to foreshadow other events, like the second insurance investigator being killed in the same way Stabila threatened Rockford. Because it all whizzes by so fast, and what might have been a clever setup is sidelined for a brief punch-up and a gag ending. It's still an entertaining episode, though, that fundamentally works. It's just a little too plot-heavy and unsatisfying for me. So, for me, it's a 4 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.